This is NextGen Indiana, where young Hoosiers talk politics.
Fight for progress, and shape Indiana's future.
From Indianapolis to Fort Wayne, Bloomington to the region, we're the next generation that won't wait our turn.
This is NextGen Indiana, the voice of young Hoosiers claiming our political power.
Well, this is NextGen Indiana, and we are in our inaugural podcast. NextGen Indiana is the voice of young Democratic and progressive Hoosiers, and we are claiming our political power. My name is Diane Dior Valentina. I am a Black and brown trans woman, and I am an activist that's dedicated to uplifting QT, BIPOC, and underrepresented communities. I am a student at Purdue University Global, based out of Indianapolis, and I now want to pass it along to one of my fellow co-hosts.
Hello, my name is Ben Baranko. I'm a freshman at IU. I'm pretty engaged in a lot of local campaigns in the Bloomington area. I'm also the student engagement director for the college, and I like to I'm in my energy to get Democrats up and down the ballot. So that's my deal.
My name is Connor Phillips. I'm currently a sophomore at Wabash College, and I've worked on political campaigns for several years. And my main goal is to give a voice to those who don't have a voice, to fight for those that need a fighter in their corner.
And I now want to pass it along to Ben, who will be covering some topics on IU in the current state of IU campus at Bloomington.
All right, yeah. So as someone who has been in this campus for the past semester and kind of been pretty deeply involved in a lot of things Bloomington and a lot of things IU and a lot of things Monroe County, I've kind of noticed some disturbing trends from IU's administration, but I think it's pretty crucial to understand where this all comes from. Um, as we know, IU is a strong blue dot in the Red Sea of South Central Indiana. Monroe County consistently votes blue, and Bloomington is a big reason for that. And I think that IU's Democratic leanings and its left leanings kind of contribute to the blueness of the city and the blueness of the county. Um, Bloomington has two great representatives at the State House, and Shelley Yoder and Matt Pierce. They've been really leading the charge on the opposing redistricting, and they really truly are some of the biggest oppositions to Republican power up at the State House. Um, and the Monroe County Democratic Party is a big organizer across the state. So I feel like Monroe County really kind of is a big thorn in the side of the Republican state party. And so it is advantageous for the state Republican Party to try to diminish IU's influence and therefore diminishing the influence of the blue county, of the blue city. And there's a couple of ways that they started to do that. Um, the first, it starts with the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has the power to fire, to review, and to hire a new president of the university. They also make a lot of financial and policy decisions for the university. And in the Senate budget bill that was passed over the summer, gave Mike Braun the power to appoint at any time or fire at any time all 9 of the trustees. Originally, the governor could appoint only 5, but now he has the power over all of them. And this gives a lot of power to Braun directly into the Republican state party. And that's specifically like we've seen that with the people he's put in. If I can remember correctly, he ousted 3 trustees members, Vivian Winston, Joe Maurer Burnett, and Donna Spears, and replaced them with Brian Eagle, James Bob Jr., and Sage Steele. And all 3 of those people are pretty loud conservative voices and Braun sympathizers. Some of them have worked alongside Braun's campaign. So they really are buddies with Mike Braun, and they're put there to, in my opinion, advance a more conservative agenda on the Board of Trustees. But the really important thing that I think this relates to is the board has the power to oversee the president. And if we know anything about President Pamela Whitten, she's not very friendly to left-leaning causes on the university. When the pro-Palestine encampment was going on at Dunn Meadow. She called in the state police to disperse it, even though Dunn Meadow is designated assembly grounds on Indiana University's campus. Um, she also had a pretty heavy, her and media school dean Davo Toljinsky also had a pretty heavy hand in censoring the IDS. Um, but the biggest thing is that her job is under a lot of scrutiny. Um, Last year, I believe over 800 faculty members voted no confidence in the president. There's been several calls for her to resign, and up until up until when the majority of her opponents on the board got replaced, there was really concern for her that she would be fired or sanctioned or put under heavy review. Um, but now that's not the case because the board of trustees has been replaced with people who sympathize with Braun and sympathize with her. And so I really think that there is some sort of it might not have been literal, but there's some sort of understanding between Braun and Witten that if Witten moves the university in a conservative direction, her job will be safe because she has a friendly board that Braun put in himself. But and I think the way we've really seen this conservatorship manifest is in the cutting of degrees as well as the censorship of the IDS. Um, in that budget bill, over 116 degree programs were cut or consolidated across all of IU campuses. And a lot of those, and that requirement was that there needs to be at least 15 graduates in a degree for like a bachelor's program, and then 10 people getting their associates in that degree. And so this eliminated a lot of liberal arts degrees, smaller foreign language degrees. And I think when we take away that kind of liberal arts aspect of the college, that's going to deter a lot of liberally minded people, and it's going to deter a lot of those who are trying to keep the university in the left leaning space. And so that's a pretty big shift away from the typical or standard values of the university. Also, the censorship of the IDS back in October, when they were told that they couldn't print any more news. They could still publish everything on their website. However, print was a big source of revenue for them. So it was pretty detrimental. In all honesty, it was censorship. Um, Telling a independent newspaper what they can and can't print at the end of the day is censorship. And I think putting those limiting factors on the IDS, on our degree programs is really, I mean, it's evident that they want to push the university into a more conservative direction and thereby ousting a lot of the Democrat political power in this county and the political power that translates to the state. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of things that are pushing in the opposite direction, and I think this current administration, namely Witten and the new trustees and Braun, they have a lot to do with that. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick. I mean, Nick. Yeah, Ben. Do you think that any of this is a result of any of like the Trump administration's current policies in terms of like overpowering things, or do you think Trump is having any influence on what's happening at IU?
Yeah, so there's definitely, I mean, as we've seen with like redistricting, the Trump administration does have a lot of pull at the state level. He can threaten the primary people. We've even seen like, even though this isn't the Trump administration, but we have seen the Republican intimidation tactics with the SWAT and the different threats under legislation. And I think that, yeah, we definitely do see a national shift. And I think that is emboldening people here at the state level, namely Braun and others, to carry out that shift towards the local level. And I think they are going after strongholds of Democratic power. And right now, Monroe County has traditionally been that stronghold, but it might not be for much longer.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting to me. Connor, do you have any questions?
What does the impact of the new trustees and just how the current administration is? What is that looking like as a student at IU?
So I think the the biggest thing is right now, students' First Amendment rights aren't really strongly protected. I don't think students at this university have an administration that will protect them and will advocate for them. Uh, if like another protest situation does occur, like what happened um, at Dunn Meadow, I don't think students here have a lot of confidence in the administration to protect their rights, to facilitate safe expression of those First Amendment rights. And it also has to do with, I mean, people's degrees are getting cut. I know someone who is a social studies education major, and that degree is coming over a lot of consolidation. So it's harder for them to obtain their education to do what they want to do. Um, so there's a lot of things that are affecting students here, and I think it's namely and those are like those are two big things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting to hear, especially IU being, Indiana's biggest uh, college university. I think it's interesting to hear all of the, I think the push of the conservative agenda, especially in that space where there's so many black and brown diverse communities.
Right, definitely. And like IU is the flagship university of the state, and to push if you want to push higher education a certain way in Indiana, it starts with IU, and they've definitely been pushing hard, um, and trying to get us to go one way because it's gonna help them out. If they don't have the Matt Pierce if they don't have the Matt Pierces and the Shelley Yoders in their legislature, they're gonna be able to get a lot more done, and they're gonna do a lot more. So pushing Bloomington, pushing Monroe County, pushing IU, we're conservative. It's all a strategical ploy to help them out, and I think it so far it's working.
How do you think this affects like Hoosiers who are not in school? Like, how does this, pushing IU to be a certain way, um, influence Hoosiers who aren't maybe college students, or maybe Hoosiers who aren't students at um, IU specifically?
Yeah. Well, I think for students at other universities, it kind of does go back to what I said. I mean, if you have an assault, there's clearly an assault on higher education at the national level and at the state level, and sometimes at the local level. And if you're pursuing this against IU, it's kind of set the tone for a lot of other universities in the state. Um, I also think that there's a lot of Democrat power and representation that comes out of, and if you don't have the Democratic leanings of the university um, pushing that, um, some of those institutions can fall away. Like I know the Monroe County Democratic Party is a huge voice and a huge for Democrats in the state, and if those go away, Democrats across the state are going to have their voices diminished. They're not going to have as many people representing them, um,
Mm,
fighting for them.
yeah,
Yeah.
super. That's super important, and I think that is uh, again more harmful. I think it's going to be more cause more harm in the long run, even like in the next like 10 years, right? If IU is overpowered by conservatives and there's not that diversity on the board of trustees, then what's to come after that for other campuses?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's the start of a trend,
Hmm.
and it definitely sets a precedent in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, and I think even with currently Bloomington and Monroe is in the ninth congressional district, and I think having Bloomington in that district, it's already pretty heavily gerrymandered, but I do think there is an opportunity for the ninth to become blue with the right candidate and the best candidate. But now they're completely carving Indiana or sorry, Monroe and putting it into, I believe it's is it the eighth or the sixth. Danny, I know you can speak more about redistricting.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and hop on into redistricting now if that works for y'all. Um, so I want to start by saying this. If you've ever said my vote doesn't matter in Indiana, you're responding to a truth that these maps that they are drawing under HB 1032 were actually built to hide. Our elections here are not competitive because they're not meant to be. The system is structured to protect power and not reflect people. And this is not voter apathy. It's voter suppression baked into geography. And if you feel powerless, that feeling is put there on purpose. They want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel like you don't matter. I'm going to get into a little bit about what redistricting really is, what it really means, what it does. But every 10 years after the census, voting districts get redrawn. In theory, they adjust for population, but in Indiana, they're adjusting for political advantage, as the author of HB 1032 said. Politicians pick their voters instead of voters picking their politicians. They design a map where they keep winning, and you keep wondering why nothing is changing. And that is not democracy. That's dominance in the process, and I don't think that is okay. I want to show you guys the map, and when we show the recording, we'll have it over the screen, but I cannot share my screen right now. But there's a map. I'm going to actually can try to put it in the chat for y'all, the host
I
to
think,
see.
yeah, I have the maps pulled up and I can take a look at them.
Well, this is the minority specific map
Oh,
that Nick Roberts shared, who is a city councilor based out of Indianapolis. And I just shared that map in the chat. But that map is really, really showing the minorities in the minority communities that are going to be affected. Indianapolis is the target. Those those areas. I just uploaded the map in the chat, but those dark shaded areas around Indianapolis, that's where Black and brown Hoosiers live. That's where young Hoosiers live. That's where queer Hoosiers live. That's where working class Hoosiers live, and that is the future of this state. So what do? They split Indy into 5 different districts: Congressional District 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9 to scatter that future. Here's the numbers. Congressional District 4 is going to have 175,724 minority residents. Congressional District 5 is going to have 149,218 residents. Congressional District 6 is going to have 205,387 minority residents. Congressional District 7 is going to have 163,360 residents. And Congressional District 9 is going to have 209,782. If those communities voted together, I think they'd have a real power to elect leaders who actually can represent them. But when they're carved up, that power gets diluted until it disappears. I want to say this slow and steady. The more you divide a community, the easier it is to control them. Now let's look at partisan data. Every single district has a double-digit Republican advantage. R12, R plus 18, R plus 22, over and over and over and over and over. Nothing competitive, no accountability, no choice. And the media market split is no accident either. Indy voters are forced into districts attached to Louisville, attached to Cincinnati, attached to Lafayette, attached to Evansville, which means neighbors dealing with the same issues don't even see the same local news or candidate ads. You divide the vote, you divide information, you divide community. Again, that's not representation. That's a strategy for their political advantage. And the thing about it is, this isn't even the regular districting cycle. Indiana is doing mid-decade redistricting because power in Washington is nervous right now. Instead of listening to Hoosiers, our representatives are taking orders from DC to protect incumbent power. Our voices, not part of the equation at all. They're being obedient and they're being complicit with what Trump and JD Vance want so they can stay in power. I'm going to think about what has passed recently, such as anti-trans legislation, abortion bans, book censorship, attacks on public schools, laws that hurt renters and workers. Most Hoosiers don't want this, but politicians don't need our approval because maps guarantee their reelection. When lawmakers can't lose, they stop caring who they hurt. Gerrymandering doesn't just silence votes, it damages lives, and that's the reality. The next chance for them to redraw maps is 2030 to 2031. By then, Gen Z and millennials are the majority. They know that we're coming. They're already planning to block us out again. If we wait until 2030, we lose another decade, and we can't let that happen. So I want to open up the floor to questions, and then I'm going to slowly transition into the next topic.
All right. I think one of the craziest things for me is I am a person who lives in the first congressional district, so that's, Lake, Porter, and part of LaPorte County. So that's
Mm-hmm.
Hammond, Gary, Portage, Chesterton, Valpo, Crown Point, Michigan City. And what is crazy to me is just to see my community just literally cut in half because they've managed to take Lake County in the southern part of Porter County and a bit of Valparaiso and stretch it out to the town of Wabash by Fort Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
And now my district, where I live, would now be part of Congressional District 2, and that goes from Portage to Warsaw.
Yeah, these
This
maps,
is crazy.
they're not even making sense. I think like when we think about resources, right, and how the resources are going to be shared, we know that Lake County, Porter County, that county up there is a predominantly black and brown community as well, right? So when we think about that, I think it's important to also remember that they're doing this to take away the resources, right? They don't want black and brown communities to have resources. They're trying to take away the equity that our communities need. And I think the reality of it is, especially within, again, that up northwest Indiana, but then also Marion County, that central Indiana area, right? I think it's important for us to remember that they are taking away resources, that they want to take away resources. And in an effort to do that, they said, "Oh, let's draw maps where the folks who need who need these resources the most won't get them anymore." You know what that does? That affects the span of life. That affects so much that folks could have, so many opportunities that folks could have, so many essential resources that folks need to thrive, right? That means less SNAP funding will be allocated to certain districts, right? We already know in Marion County, a lot of our neighbors are requiring SNAP right now. Times are hard. Everybody's looking for a job, right? And if you don't got a job, well, guess what? You can't get SNAP already, right? And they've already done this because of in an attempt again to make folks not feel to make folks feel left out, to make folks feel like they don't need these things, do other things. But the reality is that these resources help especially our black and brown communities, help especially our oppressed communities, marginalized communities, trans communities, queer communities, immigrant communities, right? I think that is something that's also not being talked about is our immigrants who have even immigrants who have their green card and who have the right to vote are citizens, right? They are also this is also affecting them. They're not just being affected by, ICE, they're also being affected by these new redrawn maps, right? So I think it's important for us to remember that we have the power to say no. We have the power to make things different. And that's going to move me into the next topic, which is how to become a delegate. Delegates decide which candidates are allowed on the ballot, who runs state parties, what priorities get funding, who speaks for us, and who never gets the chance. And that is the real power. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer it over to Connor and let Connor talk on that.
Yeah, you did. Thank you for introducing me like that. I think you got to hit on a good point too. One of the things that's important that's going on right now is a lot of silencing of voters. You talked about that with redistricting. We talked about that at IE. There's a lot of silencing of the minority. People are scared of the minority, and people are scared to see young people actually get into power. So, if you've ever wondered how to get involved in local politics, not just as a voter but as a leader, one of the most direct paths is to become a precinct chair. In Indiana, the precinct chair or precinct committee person is the backbone of grassroots politics. They are the people that really know their communities, the neighborhoods, the streets, the local problems, and the local voters. And the good news is it's very accessible for you to step into that role. This office you can run and it won't cost you next to no money. So what exactly does a precinct chair do? Think of it this way. While the federal and state lawmakers are making headlines, the real political power starts at the neighborhood level. Precinct chairs organize voter outreach, help register new voters, recruit volunteers, and mobilize neighborhoods during election cycles. When campaigns are trying to figure out what the community cares about, precinct chairs are the first to know. Let's talk about eligibility. Becoming a precinct chair in Indiana is a lot simpler than what people would think. All you have to do is be a registered Democrat and a qualified voter. That's it. There's no advanced degrees required, no campaign experience needed, and no secret political handshake. If you care about your community and are willing to put in the work, you're already halfway there. The two main ways you can become a precinct chair is either through an election or an appointment. So the first is to run for the position. Precinct chairs are elected as part of the Democrat primary every 4 years in the midterm cycle. So the next time this is up is in 2026, just next year. So not during the presidential election, but in between. To put your name on the ballot, you have to fill out what's called a Can 37. You have to submit it before the county deadline and ensure that it is certified. And this deadline is often in January, February, just before the primary election in May. The second way you can become a precinct captain is through an appointment. So let's say no one files in your precinct, or you didn't hear about the filing deadline in time. In that case, the county chair holds the power to be able to appoint someone to that role. And in the county where seats are open, they are often eager and dying to get new people and new blood into the party structure. If you are motivated and ready to contribute, reach out to your county Democrat Party is one of the most effective steps that you can take to get started. As now you might ask, why does this matter? It may feel like one precinct may not change that much, but collectively, precincts are what decides elections. Think about turnout. That's often the difference between losing a city council seat, a school board election, or even a state house race. A precinct chair who knows how to knock on doors, knows how to talk to their neighbors, and who knows how to communicate concerns can change and shift local politics in a real way. In all counties across the state, they're looking for a new wave of grassroots leaders. And if you're thinking, maybe I should get involved, this is the right time. Connecting with your county Democrat Party could lead to training, mentorship, and a chance to step into leadership before the next cycle. And of course, being a precinct chair is work. You're not just a name on a list. You're expected to show up, be present in local elections, to help organize canvassing events, and to sometimes be the person with the clipboard knocking on the doors. Many precinct chairs also appoint a vice chair or vice committee person, which gives you a partner to split the work with and keeps things balanced. And a note too, the vice chair must be the opposite gender of whoever the chair is. This is according to the Indiana State Democrat guidelines. But if you are listening to this because you want to make a difference, if you've ever said, someone should change this, then getting involved at the precinct level might be your chance to be that someone. It is politics at its most accessible, it's most local, and it's most honest, and it's most powerful. Because when you organize a neighborhood, you shape the direction of your city, your county, and eventually your entire state. So if you're thinking about it, here's your action step. Find out what precinct you live in. Look up your county Democrat Party and start a conversation. Ask about if there's an open precinct near you. Ask about the next election cycle and ask what they need right now. You'd be surprised at how quickly it maybe can turn into a leadership role. But your role doesn't just have to stop there. Because if you become involved locally, and there's another level where everyday Democrats hold real influence, becoming a state delegate. This is where grassroots meets big decisions. Every 2 years, the Indiana State Democrat Party holds a state convention in Indianapolis. Delegates from all across the state, from big counties like Marion and Lake, to small towns like Crawfordsville, Wabash, and Tell City, come together to decide what the party stands for and who they will run in the next major statewide races. So what does a state delegate do? Delegates are voting members from the state convention. They're the rare ones who read, debate, and vote this party platform, the document that spells out what Indiana Democrats believe in and what issues they are planning to fight for. Everything from education funding to reproductive rights to wages to climate policy and rural development. It all ends up in this platform. And its delegates, not consultants, not national figures, are the people who decide it. Delegates also help nominate candidates for certain statewide races. In some election years, instead of voters choosing a nominee in the primary, the delegates raise their cards and cast their votes. They pick the nominees that they believe that will represent their party and win. In presidential years, there's another responsibility: selecting which Indiana Democrats will get to go to the Democrat National Convention, or the DNC. That means delegates help shape not just what's on the state ballot, but potentially the national ticket. And here's the part that makes us all powerful. These delegates aren't just career politicians. Many of them are the same people who started out as precinct chairs, teachers, students, union members, veterans, small business owners, people who genuinely show care and passion about the community and want a seat at the table. When you go from a precinct chair to a delegate, you go from organizing your neighborhood to being one of the voices shaping the direction of the statewide party. You're not just representing yourself, but your entire community. Your voice speaks for your county, your district, and for the values of the people you knock doors for. So when you think about holding power as a Democrat in Indiana, it really starts at home. Block by block, precinct by precinct, a precinct chair helps empower voters at the local level. A state delegate carries that energy upward into the convention, into the platform, into the nominations, and the future of the entire party. If you're listening and thinking, maybe this is something I could do, you probably can. You don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to have the most perfect political resume. You just need to show up, ask questions, and take that first step. Start by finding your precinct, meeting your county party, and seeing if there is an open seat. And there it is. That seat might very well become yours. because the people who change politics in Indiana don't always come from the top. More often, they start down the steps of your neighbors and end up voting in the direction of the entire state party. So I'll turn this back over to you guys for questions.
Yeah, I really think like two are definitely know that all politics is local. And the most important change that it starts with like local politics and just someone saying, I'm tired of what's going on and I want to jump in and have a role in fixing it. And that can really be any person. And in my experience, a lot of it just starts with reaching out and sending an email or sending a text. A lot of the people, in my experience, a lot of people in our state are really eager to help out young folk and engage. Um, and it really like, I mean, that's truly how I got my start. This is I just sent a couple emails and decided I wanted to be engaged. Um, so yeah, to your point, it's all local and it's all super easy to start, but it's work worth doing and it needs to be done. Um, definitely.
And it's also worth noting, sorry, go ahead, Connor.
No, no, you're good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And it's also worth noting that you don't even have to only be 18 like to do this stuff. Some of the things to be civically engaged, you don't have to just be 18. You can be a 13-year-old and you want to make some changes, right? You can you can share your voice by sending your maybe your precinct captain or precinct chair a email, right? It could start there. It could also start by sending your elected officials, such as, your state senator or state representative in the state house an email, right? I think it's important for us to note that like you don't have to be 18 or over the age of 18 to be engaged. You can also be a 13-year-old. You can also be a 9-year-old and wanting to have your voice heard. And in an attempt to do that, you're saying, hey, I'm a constituent in your district, and I would love for you to push this agenda or push this policy, right? Or I would love for you to vote no on this, right? Because this affects me in this way. And I'm a constituent in your district, and you should listen to me. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, my personal experience with getting involved started when I was 15. I got involved and I became a precinct chair when I was 17. So, amen to that exactly. You don't have to be 18, and you can still be very young too. You can be 18, and there's nothing holding you back from getting started. Even though people may try and tell you, you have to wait, you have to wait, you have to get a law degree, you have to do X, Y, Z. That's simply just not true. You can get involved today, and in a level that actually makes actual change.
Yeah, I think everything is a lot more accessible than people think and that people are led on to believe. And one of like the perks of the accessibility is, like you said, like young people can get involved. And I think if we have more young people involved, it's really gonna give us the power to oppose a lot of, the things we're seeing in our state with the redistricting and all that. And there was one thing that I remember wanted to point out, and I remembered to point out, is that this whole redistricting battle, usually the quiet part would be that they're redrawing maps for political gain and that it's all population based. And that's what they'd be leading with. They would be pushing that it's population based, that this is the way the census is, this is the way it works for districts to be drawn. But no, they're out here outright saying that it's for political gain, that the maps are drawn for political gain. Because the real quiet part is they're diluting the minority vote, especially in Marion County. Um, that's the real part that they don't want to say out loud. And it's obvious and it shows with those maps. Splitting Marion County into four ways dilutes minority votes so heavily. The minorities in Marion County and just Marion County in general is not going to have a voice represented on the national stage. I mean, really, like they're going to draw out our only minority Muslim congressman in our state. Um, like that's why they're after this. Um, and that's not, and they're using the guise of political gain to disguise it all. But I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
and it's also again worth noting that Republicans have historically held the supermajority in Indiana, right? They currently have 7 seats in Congress. How is 9-0 even fair? They're saying
Mhm.
9-0 in Congress is what would be fair to them. That's not fair. That's not true representation, especially when we know that historically these folks have continuously been reelected, which means the folks in Marion County, the folks in up Northwest Indiana, Lake Porter County, they have liked their candidates. They have liked the folks who have ran in these offices because they've historically been reelected, right? So because we know that, and and they know that, they don't want that. They want us to be a full Republican state. They want folks on our national level to even be diluted a little, not actually not a little, a lot more than a little, um, by silencing the black and brown vote, by silencing the trans vote, by silencing the working class vote, by silencing the young people vote, right? That's just the reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Republicans are scared. They're scared to see people stand up and actually voice their concerns in these midterms. Hence why, under the orders of the president, they're following like a bunch of good soldiers and signing these new maps into law. And frankly, it's outrageous just to see a district like mine get just drawn out to communities where we don't even have the same interests. We're in a different time zone, for God's sake.
Yeah.
We have almost no connection out to that aspect, and kind of similar to Marion too. They're diluting the minority vote. They're diluting the working class vote. They're telling people your voice doesn't matter. We just need another seat. It doesn't matter how we draw it. We just need two more seats.
Right. And let's be honest, like 7-2 isn't really fair. Like I
Yeah,
believe that Indiana is a purple state with a turnout problem. And that turnout, kind of like you're saying, it all starts at local level. If Democratic neighborhood, you don't have a Democratic PC, and then all of a sudden someone's knocking at your door saying, I'm from your local Democratic Party. I mean, they're gonna feel like sometimes they're shocked. They're like, I didn't even, this was here. I didn't even know we had this. And then they're gonna be inspired to turn out because there's people like them. Um, and so to your point, all of this does start at the level, at the level, and we need heavy organization at those county levels because that's what's gonna affect statewide change at the end
And
of the
it's
day.
and it's also important to remember that, I think how do I say this? I think that we know that especially Gen Z, right, are the current young voting generation is against the stuff that Trump is doing in DC, and it's also against the stuff that the our state legislators are following that Trump is doing, right? So I think it's important for us to remember that when we're talking about the effects that it's having on folks, we know that it's a lot of the legislation that they're passing is affecting Gen Z the most, and in an attempt for young people to not be civically engaged and to not have their vote heard at all, or maybe in an attempt to discourage them to vote, they are passing these or trying to pass these new maps that, are meant to silence them. And I also want to shout out Senator Fadi Kodora, who kind of counter proposed some legislation. I think it's SB 53, if I'm not mistaken. But it is an attempt to ban what is happening in DC, or what is happening here at our state level. I want to make sure I'm saying the right bill, but I believe it's SB 53 that Senator Fadi Kodora introduced, which would actually ban mid-decade redistricting. Now we know we're in a supermajority state, so we know that it probably won't get passed, but huge kudos to him for even attempting to pass that legislation. And I also want to note that Indiana was one of the first states to have our electoral college say that Barack Obama won in 2008. I want folks to also remember that. So like Indiana has not always been this supermajority state. Indiana has not always been this, state that is just Republican, right? We got here somehow. In Indiana, we know that our Indiana representatives were not happy when Barack Obama won. So that's when they really, really started diluting these maps, right? But now they're trying to do it because they see that the folks who are most impacted by these conversations that they're having at the State House are our young folks who are the ones showing up to vote, who are the ones who are easier to discourage to vote. But I want to encourage young folks to not be afraid to vote. Show up, share your vote, and remember what's happening at the State House. It's always live streamed. Every session, every committee hearing is live on the iga.in.gov website. And I totally, highly recommend getting on there, watching committee sessions, listening to what legislators are saying. If you don't understand what a word says, what a word means, look it up. We all have devices. It's so easy to do.
Yeah, and then go off that point too. I think a lot of the reasons why talk about them trying to silence the youth vote is because they have every right to be scared. There's a reason why they're scared because I want to say a poll recently with 18 to 25-year-old found Trump's disapproval rating was -44. Young people simply don't like what's going on in Washington, and I can bet you they don't like what's going on in the state legislature either. And that's just how it is because they don't have people that are fighting for them. They don't have people that are actually representing them. They don't have people that are actually looking out for their best interests. They have people that are just working for corporate shills and people that are just fighting for themselves, just fighting to win another election, just fighting to continue to be a good little career politician. And that's ridiculous because Indiana can do so much better than that. And the problem is that we have to stand up. We can't just let this happen idly. We can't just stand idly by. We young people have a voice in this battle, but we have to exercise it. We have to get out there. We have to vote. We have to knock doors. We have to get our friends involved. We have to get our friends out to vote. We have to make sure they're registered. We can do this. We can flip this state. We can do much more when we all work together.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way of putting it, and I mean it's all the truth. It really is. Connor, I'm wondering if you had your experience as a PC. Was there any instance where you saw like county and local community organization really like coming through and being influential for turning out vote or just like affecting good change?
Um, that's a good question. Trying to think. Um, the thing with PCs is obviously we're knocking doors in our actual districts, and one of the things I know that we'd advocated for or against rather was the shortened early voting times that had happened, and we succeeded in that, as that was mostly a Democrat push. Was that something that we pushed in 2023 in the municipals? There was a 14-day early voting window. We got that to be back to the 28-day voting window for the presidential election last year. So I think that that's a good example of change that we've done, even though it's small, but it ensured that more people had their voices heard, more their votes heard, and actually got to exercise their rights.
Yeah, no, that's great because making voting accessible always going to drive better turnout, and that's a true hallmark of our democracy. And inspiring turnout through accessibility is always like that's very impactful, and it's always
Mm.
going
I know what it
to.
feels like to believe change is impossible here, but I also know what happens when young people refuse to stay quiet. We are the generation that will hold power, not someday, but right now. So if you're ready to step in, I'm ready to step with you. This is Next Gen Indiana, and we're rising together. Thank you so much for listening. See you guys next time.